You didn't realize when it started. It looked like nothing. You were doing something completely ordinary. Checking your phone, talking to someone, focusing on something for a little too long. And your cat was waiting right there. Close enough to see you. Close enough to follow your attention, had moved. They didn't react immediately. That's the part most people miss. No sound. No obvious signal that anything changed. Just a brief moment where they watched and rescheduled. Because for your feline, that shift matters more than you think. Not in an emotional, dramatic way, but in a structural one. A change in where your attention goes is a change in how they position themselves near you. And once that adjustment starts, it doesn't always look like what you predict. Can look like love or affection. Can look like temporary pause. Sometimes it looks like nothing at all. But it isn't nothing. Because in that moment, your cat isn't being passive. They're responding. And sometimes that response is what we would call jealousy. The question people use wrong. Most people, once they starts to notice these changes, ask a simple question. Can cats feel jealousy? It seems like a straightforward thing to wonder. However, the question itself is built on a misunderstanding. It assumes that jealousy must look the way it does in humans, layered with comparison, imagination, and self-awareness. Cats do not sit and compare themselves to others. They do not pose narratives about being replaced or imagine scenarios where they are less important. Their world does not operate through abstract thought in that way. But what they do possess is something far more immediate and, in many ways, more revealing. They observe patterns. They notice consistency. And most importantly, they are super sensitive to where your attention goes, how often it returns, and whether it remains stable. For a cat, attention is not just interaction. It is structure. It is part of how their environment makes sense. When that structure changes, when your attention becomes not stable, redirected, or suddenly shared with something new, the change does not go unnoticed, cannot be disregarded. And so, rather than feeling jealousy as a concept, they respond to it as a disruption. What follows is not an emotional display. It is an adjustment. The pause of your movement. One of the earliest ways this adjustment appears is so common that it is almost always misread. You stand up. You start to walk. You are heading somewhere with a clear motivation, even if it is something small. And then, without warning, your cat moves into your path. They do not rush. They do not pounce. They simply place themselves between you and wherever you were going, forcing you to slow down, step around, or stop entirely. From the outside, it looks harmless, even affectionate. It is easy to interpret it as a desire for closeness, a simple request for attention. But the timing is what reveals the deeper pattern. This behavior tends to emerge exactly once your movement is directed away from them, toward another person, another task, or another focus. In that sense, it is not just about being near you. It is about altering the trajectory of your attention. By interrupting your movement, your cat is inserting themselves into the sequence of events, repositioning themselves as part of what happens next. It is a quiet form of redirection. Not forceful, not chaotic, but effective. Because in that moment, your attention, if only briefly, returns. The sudden intensity of love. Sometimes, however, the response takes a very different style. Instead of interrupting you, your cat becomes unusually present. A cat that is typically independent may begin to follow you more closely, staying within reach, brushing against you more often, resting near you for longer periods than usual. First, it feels like a positive change. An increase in affection is easy to welcome. Feels like connection, like warmth, like rely on. But again, the key is not the behavior itself. It is the context in which it appears. This heightened closeness often emerges when your attention has been diverted elsewhere, toward a device, a person, or even a new routine that did not exist before. In that environment, the behavior begins to look less like sudden affection and more like a response to instability. Your cat is not simply starting more affectionate. They are reinforcing the bond, reestablishing proximity, ensuring that whatever shift has occurred does not fully displace them. It is not dramatic. It is not desperate. But it is deliberate in its timing. appearing exactly when the balance of attention begins to change. The checking your reaction. If proximity does not restore that balance, another pattern begins to appear, one that is often misunderstood as mischief or randomness. Objects move, something falls, a sound interrupts the quiet rhythm of the room. It may seem accidental at first, a simple act of curiosity or play, but again, the timing matters. These moments often occur when your attention is deeply focused elsewhere. You are engaged, absorbed, unavailable in a way that creates a temporary distance between you and your cat. And in that distance, the behavior escalates, not in intensity but in precision. The object that is moved is not chosen at random. It is something visible, something capable of making a reaction. The action itself is simple, almost minimal, but the outcome is predictable. You look up, you respond, your attention returns. Thus, the behavior serves a purpose. Not to destroy, not to disrupt for its own sake, but to reinsert your cat into your awareness. It is not driven by spite. It is driven by effectiveness. And once it works, even once, it becomes part of the pattern. The monitoring you don't notice. There is another response, quieter than all the others, and often overlooked entirely. Your cat remains in the room, but something about their readiness changes. They are no longer moving toward you, no longer initiating interaction. Instead, they observe. From a distance that feels intentional, they watch. Not with tension or visible frustration, but with a kind of stillness that is difficult to grasp. They are present, aware, and yet removed from direct engagement. This is not withdrawal in the sense of fear or distress. They continue to behave normally in every other aspect. They eat, they groom, they move through their environment without hesitation. The only difference is how they relate to you. It is a subtle repositioning, a shift from participant to observer. And because nothing outwardly dramatic is happening, it is often missed entirely. But this too is a response to change. The selective away. Over time, if the shift in attention becomes consistent, this observational distance can develop into something more defined. Your cat may begin to interact with you differently than before. They may stop greeting you at the same moments. They may not respond as readily when you call. They may choose positions in the room that keep them just outside of easy reach. What makes this pattern distinct is its selectivity. The change is not global. It does not affect how your cat interacts with their environment as a whole. It affects how they interact with you. This is not absence. It is adjustment. Your cat is recalibrating their behavior based on the stability or instability of the attention they receive. Not consciously, not strategically in a human sense, but consistently enough that it forms a new pattern. And once that pattern settles, it can be difficult to reverse without changing the conditions that created it. The role of scent and territory. In some cases, the shift becomes more tangible, expressed through actions that seem unrelated at first glance. A change in scent, a new presence in the environment, or even something as subtle as unfamiliar smells carried on your clothing can alter how your cat perceives their space. Cats do not separate emotional connection from physical environment in the same way humans do. For them, territory and relationship are deeply intertwined. When something unfamiliar enters that space, especially something associated with your attention, it can create a sense of disruption. This is where behaviors that seem confusing begin to appear. Marking, avoidance of certain areas, or increased focus on specific objects can all be part of how your cat responds to that disruption. These actions are not random. They are attempts to restore familiarity, to reestablish a sense of control within an environment that has subtly changed. And at the center of that environment is you. The realization that changes everything. So no, your cat is not sitting in the corner, comparing themselves to others or feeling replaced in a human sense. But they are constantly aware of something that most people overlook. They notice where your attention goes. They notice when it lingers elsewhere. And they notice when the patterns they rely on begin to shift. And in response, they change. Quietly, gradually, precisely. Once you begin to see these patterns, the behaviors that once felt random start to feel connected. The interruptions, the closeness, the silence, they are no longer separate moments. They are part of a system, a way of maintaining balance in a relationship that, from your cat's perspective, is always in motion. And the most unsettling part is this: the moment that change begins is usually the moment you're not looking.